Hi, I hope your day is going great. In this video, I'm going to go ahead and cover Azure Data Studio and Power BI environment. What I'm going to go ahead and do is show you the SQL Server Management Studio, which I had set up, and I'm going to have the Azure Data Studio, the Microsoft Visual Studio Professional 2022, and that will be all connected into the Azure database that I will have set up, and then we'll use Power BI to connect and create some reports. So let's get started. Okay. First, let's go ahead and set up the SQL Server. And while you're doing that, make sure that you're, getting all the components installed. As I show you in the video here, there's going to be, various different pieces that you want to set up. That's if you want to set up a server local on your system to run through tests and set up your Power BI to pull streaming data or other data sets, just not streaming data, just basically sets of data that you'll want to run and create your BI reports. So now that you got your SQL Server installed on your local system, you want to get logged into it, and then we'll go ahead and run some queries. We want to probably go and upload that data to the Azure database that you've created. You should have an Azure account set up if you're going to follow along, or you just want to watch the video, that's fine. That's pretty much the environment I had to set up. And also I have a Power BI environment account set up. So I had to get those set up prior to starting this. And so I could download all the tools I needed. And then I can create my own data sets from my own data server that's local, which I will take that data and upload it to Azure. The whole database will be uploaded there. I'll show you how to do that. It's pretty easy. It depends on how large the database is. This one's not really large, so it takes approximately 20 minutes to transfer the database to the data server on Azure. And I'll show you how that's done. So here in Azure, I'm going to go ahead and review, make sure I have my server set up for the database that I'll be then transferring to Azure. And I set up a free account. I think it's like 30 days free account, so I can kind of play around with it and see how it works. Actually, I think it really works well. I've tried AWS a while back. It was a little more complex. Maybe they fixed some things, but Azure seems a little more straightforward. I guess I'm used to working with Microsoft products, so I have a better feel of working with their products. I kind of know what to expect. So, it really depends on your comfort. So when you go to deploy the SQL Server, make sure the SQL agent is turned on. You're not going to get any errors on that. When you go to deploy, I usually use task, and then there's a deploy database, Microsoft Azure Zone. If you're AWS, you may want to set up AWS. Here, I set up Azure. I'm a lot more comfortable with their software tools, and so I'm going to go ahead and utilize that. And this kind of shows where I do have experience in the cloud environment and in a cloud database environment. So I know how to connect to that. I know how to do my queries against those databases. And so that shows all this. This is, it's not really a video to show you how to do things. It's basically, showing you a environment for BI. There's many different environments you can set up for BI, Power BI. This is one environment that's somewhat common, seen that SQL Server is widely used in many companies. Now, with Oracle, you can do the same. It does interface with Oracle pretty well, so Power BI has no problem with that. It's just getting connected to the database tables and being able to download that data into Power BI so you can get your data sets set up for various different chart displays. Okay, so now that the database has been uploaded to Azure, now you have a AdventureWorks DW on Azure. I'm going to go ahead and connect to Azure. So when you're using the or adding the server name, when you're going to connect to Azure, it'll end with a Windows.net string. So whatever your database is, Windows.net, and then you're going to be using the local administrator account to log in. You don't use the network account to log in, so that it'll have full administrative access. So that's what you want to set up, and then go ahead and get yourself connected. Okay, so now that I've been connected to Azure SQL Server that I created on Azure, now I can see that the AdventureWorks DW database is there. So here I can view data off of Azure. So now I know I can access the data server, I can access the database, I can now view the data that's on the database. So I'm pretty much set up that I'm able to now set up the BI reports and start pulling in data. But let's go ahead and look at a few other tools that we can use to do some of the queries on the database, and then you can actually query from here in addition. But there's other tools that you'd want to try out. Depends on your comfort, what you like, what works for you, or what's available. If you're doing consulting, which I do a lot of consulting, and pretty much I have to use the tools that the company that I'm working for, the clients provide. I can't bring a lot of times my own tools. So I'm usually provided the tools, and then I can do the access to their database and pull data for BI, Power BI reports. So here I set up Azure Data Studio so I can now connect to both the local database if I want. But if you're working off an Azure database, you might want to just connect to the Azure database because that's what you're going to be running your queries off of. If you want to do data set queries, that's your best bet there. Yeah, the primary focus here is connecting to Azure database, and so I can show how that is done. Yeah, you can connect to a local database too. But my reason to set up a local database was to create a simulated live data to a Azure environment so that I can show how BI works off that. As you connect your databases to, also you can see the health of the system. It has the information how well the system's working. So it gives you a little bit of information on the system and making sure that you're not having a lot of issues or anything. And, but it's you use it to just pretty much review the CPU usage, memory usage, and stuff. That's always important when you're deploying data. If it's being overtasked, you're gonna probably have a lot of timeout errors and stuff. So, double check that. If there's major issues, then the administrator who is administrating that needs to tune it and make sure that you're getting the most capabilities out of that system. So here I can show you, a little bit of how it works. Again, when you connect to the Azure database, you're going to be using that windows.net link. You're using the administrative local account on your Azure database that you set up when you're creating that server. So make sure you note that when you do that, if you're going to test this out yourself. So then you can actually get connected in. Otherwise, you're trying to just use the login to Azure. That will not work. It's gonna give you a lot of errors. So just work-wise, make sure you have if you can set that up, you're noting it well, and you can reference back to it. So you can see I have Azure now connected. I see that there's tables. I can run queries, set a little query to just kind of pull the data, see how it works. That seems to be pretty quick. It'll, I'm using DSL to connect to this, so it's a little bit slower than if I was actually in a domain environment and connecting to Azure, or you have a little bit faster network connecting up to Azure, to the cloud, and to your domain, local domain. You may have a faster connection than DSL. But DSL works fine. It does. It's you can do streaming video and everything else. So it works fine for this type of port. And I didn't see a whole lot of delay. Now, if you're running your queries, depending on how large they are, it can take much longer to pull the data. This is I guess you could say, the older process of connecting to your data. So, uh, pulling that data into the Power BI. There's slow ways and there's fast ways. The slow way usually is running a lot of your queries and pulling data and dropping it into an Excel spreadsheet and then pulling that data from the Excel spreadsheet into BI. That's the slow way. It takes a lot more time. Sometimes queries can take a while to pull that data. So there's fast ways and there's slow ways. It really depends on the bandwidth of your connection and how well you can pull that data. So it depends. You have to determine what method you want to use that works best for your group when you're setting that up, um, so that they can get that data into reports and provide it to whoever needs to provide information. They're having a meeting maybe, and they want to talk about the sales, maybe a sales manager or whatever. So they're getting that report from you, and they want to get that in the morning. Well, if you're running a query that takes you maybe a half hour or something like that, versus uh, pulling it using the BI tool, which can maybe take 5 minutes to 10 minutes. There's a big difference there, and you have more time to create these reports and get ready, visualize them, make sure they're right, have maybe someone else look over, make sure everything's correct while you're doing that. Until you get used to whatever reports you're providing, it's always good to have someone review your stuff and you review their stuff prior to providing those reports, because you want to have them right so that if they're being presented, they're correct. And doing reports really fast on the fly, yeah, it's better to you know have a lot of this stuff the day before and make sure it's all right. And then if they have to present that information in the morning, they have time to do a little tweaking if they need to. But it's normally, yeah, you get the report done one day, the next day it's being presented in the morning or something like that, or an afternoon for some meeting. So here I set up the Microsoft Visual Studio Professional 2022, and I was able to successfully connect to the local database, no issues. And I have also was able to connect to the Azure database, and there's no issues there. It just gives you another tool that you can run your queries off of. It really depends on what tools are available to you. If you're working on a site, uh, usually the client provides a lot of those tools. Some tools you can download. They allow you to download and install on your system. But some environments are really tight. You can't install anything, so you have to request it, and sometimes you don't get what you request. So you get whatever they provide you. This is another tool that you might be provided. If you're working in a Microsoft shop, they have a lot of Microsoft tools that they use. They're going to probably have the Microsoft Visual Studio Professional. They may have the 2019 or they may have the 2022. There's, some additional features in 2022, so it's good to have that so you can take advantage of some of the additional functionality. In this, I'm only connecting to the databases and running queries off it, so there's not a real big difference between them 2019 and 2022. If you're going to just do that, it's just really basic. You go and connect your database server and you run your queries. So as you see, I had a query ready that ran. It does take close to 15 minutes to pull this data from this query. So I found that this was a little bit slower connection in running my queries. And so I ran the query prior to this to, just show you the data and the same query that I ran. This, in addition, you can export the data into a CSV file, same as the SQL Server Management Studio, but you may not have access to that. because that's usually administrative. So the tool you may be provided to do any queries off of is the Azure Data Studio or the Microsoft Visual Studio Professional. Uh, I find between those two, the Azure Data Studio works the most efficient. So if you're going to have a choice of tools to run queries off of, I would say use Azure Data Studio. It connects pretty well. It's a lot faster in pulling the data. I think it's a little bit more efficient tool. This Microsoft Visual Studio, it's great for if you're setting up projects and you're developing something. Um, just using it for simply running queries, it's kind of an overkill because it's a developer tool uh, made for development of applications and such. So I would probably just lean towards using the Azure Data Studio. I just wanted to actually show that, yeah, you can connect to Azure with this and you can run queries. So if you are a developer, you have the ability to do that and create your applications that are going to be tying into the database and whatever you're trying to fulfill for the business. Okay, so here I went and opened up the Power BI desktop, and I'm going to go ahead and get this set up so that we can pull the data from Azure database and then set up some of the data sets. Now, when you first open up the Power BI desktop, you'll see options right displayed of what you can do to connect to your data. Or to see more options, you can go to the file and go to get data. And then you'll have options. Say if you had Azure Analyst Service Database set up, which at this point I don't have that set up. I only have the SQL Server Database set up. So what I'm going to show is connecting to the SQL Server database. But if you have the Azure Analytics Server Services database set up, then you would be able to connect to that and pull data sets from that have been already created. That might be the better option in a work environment because then you're not having people connect directly to a live database. Although just, you have to have your groups and all set up within that database and what their access is. So that can be still controlled very well. It's not all that dangerous as long as it's being set up correctly. But in the Azure Analysis Service database, it can set up a lot of different data groups that can create data sets for you to pull. So that may be a better route in a type of a business environment where speed is in a sense, and you want to grab what is required only, and say, pull this data from the Azure Analyst Services. And so you go and pull that data, and then you do reports on it. It's a lot more efficient that way. And you can then group all your data together. So it's, it just really depends on your environment, what you're setting up. Here, you'll find, in addition to it, you can pull text and CSV. So if you're just using the top menus, you'll see that it only gives you that Excel workbook. So when you click on that, you go, oh, gee, you can't upload your CSV files. Well, your CSV files can be uploaded. You have a choice. You go into files, get data, and then this, yeah, have text and CSV. And also, if you're pulling data from a web, you can do that. There's many other options to pull data. Here, we're just going to focus on pulling data from this SQL Server database, just to show how that works with the Power BI. So when you're connecting to the SQL Server database on Azure, you can then put in the database. And also, you can do the direct queries. Like, let's say, it depends on the speed of your connection, how efficient that is with your system, or you can do an import. I'm going off DSL. I think it's best to just do an import. It's not going to bog down the system as much that way. I can get to work pretty quickly. I find that it takes, if I'm doing it this way, it may take no more than 5 minutes to 10 minutes to pull the data I want and then start creating my data sets and reports. Okay, so, there's a couple different methods it gives you right there. Now you can see there are other options. If you take a look at this, that you can have a SQL statement, or you can select that you want to navigate using full hierarchy. That, it just really depends on your connection, how quick you can connect to the system. If you're just creating data sets, again, you don't need these additional options. Just doing the import is pretty much all you need. And it's, like I say, it's fairly quick. So enabling SQL Server's failover support, it's not necessary. Just running it using the import. If you're creating BI reports, you're not an administrator, you're not doing administrative work, just doing the import, that's all you need to do. That's the only option that you should really be working with, and it's quick. So the next screen that you're going to go to is the navigator screen. This is going to display all your tables that it's seen. It gives you the option then to select only the business data. There's a lot of system data in there that you don't want. If you're a system administrator, you may want it. But if you're just creating the business report, that's all you need. Just display that, select the tables that you're going to be using, and it's going to be a pretty quick download that way. And then you can, you have your data sets that you can then start creating reports off of. The rest of it was just some of the system data. So now the data has been pulled. And you'll see the load going. This takes only 10 minutes to pull the data. Now you see all the data on the filled side, shows everything is there. Now you can go into the tables, review the tables, see what data is in there, so you can start mapping out what tables have what data and what you want to pull into those reports. That there actually helps out kind of planning out your strategy. And then you can look at the schema, review that. It shows all the relational. Sometimes you have these outlier tables sitting out there. You want to pull those in so you can kind of see everything when you're reviewing your data scheme and all the relations and such. So that you can after you have all your data, go ahead and just start typing in the text. You can then create a report from that. You can start then, sizing up how that window's going to look. This is part of the report. This is the full data of the cells. So then you may want to then create some visual effects. You can have a little background, makes it a little bit nicer. And when you're clicking around, sometimes you'll see that it lost its focus. So you just have to the data set report piece. Actually, it's data set within a report. These are data sets that you're looking at. Every one of those are looked at as a data set. This is a set of data that is providing that piece of a report. The whole thing is a report. And this is going to actually provide a dashboard type of report. So you have a little bit of drill down capabilities on it. So let's see, let's go ahead and publish that to the Power BI on the web. Now you'll find that once you get in there, you look, you can't see it. Go to the data hub and you should then be able to find what was published, and then you can open that up, and that will then be listed next time you go into Power BI web. It'll be already on the list, and you can actually bookmark it, so it'll always be at the very top. Now, looking through this, I see that there is some columns I didn't want there, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that. Best thing to do is do it on the desktop and then do republish and do replace. That will automatically replace it, and your report will be still linked on the very front page when you log in. It'll be displayed there. Even when you had it bookmarked before, it'll still be bookmarked. So it doesn't remove all that information. It only removes your report and replaces it with a new one and new data. So that's pretty much it on doing the editing. And at this point, I didn't do any, so it's ready. Basically, once I do the updates, it's pretty much ready to be shared. So I can go ahead and share it if I want, but just kind of review it again. As you can see, it has drill down. I can look at the various different cell area regions, and that changes when I'm clicking on it. So that's pretty much it. That's just kind of a Power BI in a nutshell, you could say. Hopefully this was great to view. If you're setting this up, you would want to have, the skill set of creating your own data set, having all that before you start messing around here. I'm not really showing this to teach anyone how to do it. This is just kind of a review of the data sets that can be provided to Power BI for these type of environments. And this type of environment I am most familiar with, and so I went ahead and created my free accounts on Power BI and Azure cloud environment so that I could go ahead and run some tests and get some live data. That's always nice to do. They do have some sample data on Azure and sample data on Power BI, but it's nothing like getting some real sample data from an actual server so that you can show, yeah, this is what the differences are. And it gives you then that chance to play around a little bit more with Power BI and different data sets. Right. Well, I hope this was great and you have a enjoyable day. Have fun.